Woke mainstream media panics as frustration against legacy news explodes. We're definitely going to get into a lot of detail on this. So welcome back to Views with Hughes, Culture and News. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. Well, here we are right now, people. Another day, another example of the mainstream media crumbling right before our eyes. And I've got to tell you, they know it too. Oh, do they know it? Now, the mainstream media is in for full panic mode, including MSNBC and even CBS. And you can see the fear in their eyes, hear the desperation in their voices. And the mainstream media, the so-called gatekeepers of the truth, are watching their power slip right away. And guess what? They can't even handle it. Now, let me tell you about Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes. She's been a staple of the mainstream media for decades, a real dinosaur of the legacy news world, or a fossil, if you will. And recently she admitted something shocking. She said, and I quote, "I'm very dark about the future of the mainstream media." Now, this wasn't some offhand comment, but she actually said it during a conversation with Peggy Noonan, another longtime member of the mainstream media elite club. And these two icons of the mainstream media both sat down and had themselves a little pity party, lamenting how trust in the mainstream media is at an all-time low. I mean, this shouldn't be much of a surprise to many people, but think about that for a second. The mainstream media is openly admitting that people don't trust them anymore. But I mean, can you blame the public? For decades, the mainstream media actually always lied to us, spun narratives, and suppressed voices that didn't even align with their agendas. Now, the mainstream media built its, entire empire on controlling the flow of information. And now that the internet has broken their monopoly, guess what? The mainstream media is scrambling to go ahead and try to stay relevant. Now, Stahl went on to say that I'm very worried about the mainstream media. It's kind of hobbling right now, and I don't know how it recovers. Well, here's the truth. The mainstream media doesn't recover. You see, the jig is up. People are waking up to, the fact that the mainstream media doesn't have their best interests at heart. You see, the mainstream media has been exposed for what it really is, the tool for gatekeeping, and narrative control. I mean, it's pretty simple to actually see that. And yet at the same time, it's not really much of a surprise. But then here's how the mainstream media got here. For decades, the mainstream media thrived because, it was operated as a monopoly. ABC, CBS, NBC, these were, the giants of mainstream media, controlling what people saw, heard, and believed. Now, the mainstream media had the power to shape public opinion, and they used it to their advantage, unfortunately. But then the internet came along and changed everything, including things to stop the mainstream media. Now, with the rise of platforms like YouTube and X, formerly known as Twitter, has been a game changer. And these platforms have actually allowed people to bypass, the mainstream media and seek out alternative sources of information. The information that's telling the truth. And the mainstream media wasn't the only game, in town. And guess what? People realize that they don't need the mainstream media to tell them what to think. In other words, the mainstream media needed people more than people need the mainstream media. But look at the numbers. According to Gallup, trust in the mainstream media is at a historic low. Only 31% of Americans, barely a third, say they trust the mainstream media to report the news fairly. Honestly, that's an abysmal number. Now, the mainstream media is now about as trusted as used car salesmen and telemarketers. And honestly, that might be giving the mainstream media too much credit, if you ask me. But I mean, who am I? I'm just a lowly YouTuber and everything. But think about this. For the third year in a row, Gallup found that trust in the mainstream media is hovering in the gutter. 31%. That means 2 out of, 3 Americans have had enough of the mainstream media's lies and propaganda. We even saw that in the results of elections. And they're turning away from the mainstream media in droves. And, well, guess what? Who can blame them? I mean, this is, the same mainstream media out there that told us to go ahead and trust the science also told us the certain laptop story was disinformation, and the same mainstream media, that called the riots in the Summer of Love mostly peaceful protests also said that inflation was transitory. Now, the mainstream media also has been lying to us for years, and people are finally waking up to it. That's also one of the reasons why I started this channel, but here's the kicker. The mainstream media isn't just losing trust, they're losing viewers. I mean, big times. Let's take Megyn Kelly, for example. She was a part of the mainstream media. She's a former mainstream media insider who's now thriving outside of it. She's pulling in 30 million views in a week on YouTube. 30 million. That's more than what CNN or MSNBC and even some of Fox News combined. I hope one day, Lord willing, I can get to that number, but the mainstream media can't compete with numbers like that, okay? And guess what? Megyn Kelly isn't the only one. You also have Tucker Carlson, who was once the cornerstone of the mainstream media, is now crushing it on X. He's also drawing in, massive audiences far outpacing anything that the mainstream media could ever dream of. Okay. And let's be real. Independent creators like even Tim Pool, The Quartering, and The Daily Wire are also thriving. Well, The Daily Wire is starting to become questionable, but even left-leaning outlets like the Young Turks and the All In podcast are outperforming the mainstream media. So you got the mainstream media being ignored by people on both sides of the aisle. And why is this happening? Because people are tired of the mainstream media and their lies. They're tired of being, condescended to. They're also tired of, the mainstream media acting like it's an arbiter of truth. Now, the rise of independent media has shown that people want real, honest, unfiltered conversations, something that, the mainstream media has never been able to provide. And let's be honest here. I mean, that shouldn't be any surprise to any of us, okay? The mainstream media has always been about control. It's about control of what you see, what you hear, and what you believe. But guess what? The internet has leveled the playing field. Platforms like, YouTube and even X have allowed people to bypass the mainstream media and go ahead and follow alternative sources of information. And guess what? The people actually like it. They actually like the fact that they have options. They like being able to hear different perspectives and even make up their own minds, something that they wanted the mainstream media to go ahead and help them with. But, compare that to the mainstream media where every anchor is reading the same script, pushing the same narrative. We saw that even in 2020 with this sort of happening. And remember that infamous Sinclair broadcast group clip? Dozens of local mainstream media stations all saying the exact same thing about the dangers of misinformation at a certain pandemic. Now, that's the real danger right there. Corporate controlled groupthink disguised as journalism. Now, the mainstream media doesn't necessarily want you to think for yourself. They want you to think what they tell you to think. Okay. And I've been saying this for years too, even when I first started this channel. Now, this isn't just about news. The decline of mainstream media has huge implications for entertainment as well. Why? Well, because most of the mainstream media outlets are owned by massive corporations like Disney and even Comcast. Now, these companies use their mainstream media platforms to push their own agendas and protect their own interests. I mean, I've seen this from my way. I've talked about it before, but think about it. If Disney owns ABC News and ABC News loses credibility as part of the mainstream media, what does that do to Disney's brand? If people stop trusting the mainstream media, they're less likely to buy into the hype surrounding Disney's latest Star Wars or Marvel project. And guess what? Let's be honest. Those projects, as I've been talking about all the time, have been a huge mixed bag lately. And definitely it's about time. And this is why the elites in the mainstream media are freaking out. They know that, once the mainstream media monopoly collapses, they lose control over the narrative. They can't, gaslight us into thinking a bad movie is a masterpiece. They can't spin, the whole unpopular policies into must-have progress. You see, the mainstream media is losing its grip, and they know it. They actually know that they're losing their group, and that's why they're panicking right now. And here's the best part. There's no going back. The genie is out the bottle. The internet has changed everything. The mainstream media no longer has a monopoly of, information, and they can't stand it. Okay. And people are waking up to the fact that the mainstream media is looking out for them. Now, the mainstream media is looking out for themselves. Okay, the outlets like NBC, MSNBC, ABC, and everything. So Leslie, Peggy, even Rachel Maddow, if you're watching, and let's be honest, they're probably not. But if they are, we've got a message for y'all. It's over. The mainstream media is done. The new media is here to stay. And guess what? We're just getting started. Okay. Now, for example, take a look at X, formerly known as Twitter. It's exploded as, a news source that's rivaling the mainstream media at every turn. It's the biggest news app in the world. And let's not forget how the mainstream media actually, mocked Elon Musk when he even bought it. They ridiculed him and said it was overpriced and said he'd run it into the ground. But let's be honest, who's laughing now? Elon is. And guess what? We're laughing as well. Now X is thriving. YouTube is thriving. Independent creators are thriving. And the best part is it's not just conservatives or liberals. It's everybody. Megyn Kelly on the right, the Young Turks on the left, even people who are in the middle, like as someone would say, the All In podcast are pulling in massive audiences. And they're doing it without the mainstream media. Okay. I wouldn't even be surprised if people from the mainstream media will go ahead and work for any of these entities. But this isn't just a win for new media. It's a win for free speech. It's a win for accountability. It's a win for the truth. And guess what? For years, the mainstream media told us what to think, how to think, what to believe, what's acceptable to say. But now we get to decide that for ourselves. You get to decide that for yourselves, too. Now, let the mainstream media elites like Leslie Stahl and Peggy Noonan and even Rachel Maddow have their pity parties. Let them bemoan the loss of their power, because the rest of us, guess what? We're moving forward. We're building something better. And that's all thanks to you all. All right. And let's be real. That's the real story here. And this isn't just about the decline of the mainstream media, as you all know. This is about the rise of something new, something better, something that actually puts the power back where it belongs, in the hands of you, the people. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have on this particular topic. If you enjoy what I shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button and share the video far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already, you enjoyed all the content I put on this channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell notification so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.